We're moving on to Topic Tuesday. Oh, this is another big one from
Hold on, are you
at
not going to
yeah.
say hi to Michelle Wegman?
Hi, Michelle Wegman. I was busy setting up the computer. That was a memory ago. That was in that part, and it moved right into that part. Hey, Michelle Wegman. I'm not going to announce something special Michelle's working on. I'm going to wait and see if she wants to type it to you, and then we would announce it. But there is something that Michelle's working on that's kind of special. I'm psyched about. All right, Topic Tuesday, written by Adam. Adam Ahmed. He comes up with such great, interesting information. I can't even wait for you to see what we start off with in July. Because remember, I'm reading the stuff that we wrapped up from last week, which was the end of June. Okay, so this is the end of his medication post, which is talking about some atypical antihypertensive drugs that kind of don't fit any categories that we had discussed before. And a lot of those we talked about were beta blockers and ACE inhibitors. So we talked about diuretics as well last week. And so one of the main effects that came through talking about diuretics was that it does increase your ability to urinate. That's how you're going to rid the body of all your extra fluid. So let's talk about the different types of diuretics because they do different things. There was thiazide, there was loop diuretics, and then there's should reduce the chances that you're going to lose some potassium in that process of avoiding. So they actually can also, one of those can actually be used to help treat kidney stones. And I'm curious to know if anybody remembers because I do not remember. But my guess would be
It's
potassium
on there,
sparing.
Karen. It's
Probably
on
not.
there.
It
It's
does?
on there. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to
Potassium
find out in a
something.
minute because I don't see it. So I'm not going to ask you to guess because you'll win. But then you win at a lot of things. All
Oh, I
right.
forgot.
So
You can't see it. Or can you?
I can't see it. All right. So what he went into this last week was an article from the American Heart Association. And this was kind of talking about changes that you can make to help manage this. And before we talk about some of the drugs that was coming up in last week, he really wanted to kind of go over the sympathetic nervous system, which is also called the flight or fight, or fight or flight. Could be either or. It includes both of those. It's the fight or flight response system. And so the body actually produces two main hormones, norepinephrine. God, I can't say these words. Norepinephrine
Sounds good.
and epinephrine. I would have said norepinephrine, but I know it's norepinephrine and epinephrine. So or adrenaline. Okay. And these hormones can actually bind several different receptors, which meditates different types of effects on the body. So only one effect that they carry out and they do is by binding alpha-1 receptors, which is called pro-sympathetic, which acts by increasing the smooth muscle contraction throughout the body. So additionally, epinephrine can bind beta-1 receptors, which increases heart rate and pumping. So I'm not sure if everybody knew that there are these receptors or beta blockers. They actually block to fight high blood pressure. So there's these drugs that also work against your heart rate rhythms as well. This is a graphic that Adam put up that kind of helps explain the norepinephrine and epinephrine and the smooth muscle contraction and blood vessels. And this is us talking about the very first antihypertensive drug he discussed was the alpha-1 blocker drug. Those are the drugs that we take that end in zosin. So remember we talked about the beta blockers end in lol. They're the LOLs like nebivolol and labetalol and metoprolol. And then there were the drugs that ended in the tans. And then so the prils, these are the many different classifications of drugs. These actually end in the zosin, like doxazosin and prazosin. So these drugs actually oppose alpha-1 mediated arterial contraction and therefore help oppose high blood pressure. It's way above my pay grade, but I just know that they do what they're supposed to do. Oh, that works for me. Some of the side effects, if you're put on one of these zosin drugs, would include dizziness, a faster heart rate, and some weakness. Okay. The next drug was the alpha 2 agonist. And if alpha 1 was pro-sympathetic, then we have to assume that alpha 2 is the arch nemesis, and that's the anti-sympathetic system receptor. So drugs in this class tend to end in INE, like clonidine, guanfacine, a methyl-dopa. That's the only exception to the rule. How to pronounce these words? Although I know clonidine because I take that. These drugs activate alpha 2 receptors, which opposes alpha 1 effects. So it causes a decrease in vasoconstriction. And some of the side effects that you're going to have with this could be dry mouth, fatigue, hunger, and some sexual dysfunction. Now, one things I do know is clonidine comes in pill form, but it also comes in a patch that you change once a week. The important thing I do remember from listening to Dr. Watson, who is a doctor of pharmacy, and we have our videos of her interviewing her on YouTube. There's also a link to her drugs that are listed underneath the resources, is if you're on clonidine, you do not want to cold turkey that. You cannot cold turkey that. You can have a rebound effect. So if you don't get that new patch on, take that new medication within your 24-hour time frame, you could have a massive spike in blood pressure, and that would be no bueno, no good. Okay. And then there's also direct vasodilators. And like the name implies, it basically causes muscle vessel walls, especially arterioles, to widen and dilate. So that allows much more blood flow to come through easier with less pressure. So the two main drugs that are in that classification would be hydralazine and minoxidil. Okay, so the side effects include a potential headache, eye swelling, fluid retention that happens with minoxidil, and joint pain with hydralazine. So doesn't mean you're going to have these side effects. It just means if in these drugs that we've mentioned and talked about, that Adam's talked about, you're feeling some things, talk to your doctor. So we're actually kicking off next week, which is actually posted next week. So you won't hear about this on here for 2 weeks, is imaging. And we're going to talk about all of the different diagnostic tests that people in this community can have. So it could be an MRI TEE, a regular TEE, a CT, X-ray, all different types of tests that you can have. We're going to talk about them. Can't wait to hear about your opinion, your thoughts, and how you felt, because there's so many questions, right, Terry? We field these all the time. I have
Absolutely.
an MRI and it says I measured 4.2. I have a CT, it says I measured 4.3. First of all, there's no difference.
And the some of them I've heard MRI, MRA, you have with contrast, without contrast, you have a CT scan it's just, there's so many that, what are the tests? What should we look for, or what should we ask our doctors about? I'm looking forward to that as well.
Because I'll talk to people and I'm like, I don't get CTs unless I'm in the ER. And they're like, well,
Right.
then you're not getting an accurate picture.
Right.
So first, as you know, don't tell me I'm not getting an accurate picture. But of course I am. And the reason I don't get CTs is because I am so beyond allergic to the dye that even with pre-medication, I break through. So my next reaction is going to be an anaphylactic reaction. And we just don't want to have that happen. So
No.
at the end of the day, I don't care what the radiologist says my results are. I care about my surgeon actually putting it on the screen, and he measures it himself. He measured it in the same angle, in the same direction, the same spot. He tells me what the size is, not the radiologist.
Right.
So I'm not dissing radiologists. I'm just saying I rely on my doctor to do as hands-on approach as he can in measuring it. And that may bring up a question for you to have with your own doctor, to ask, to talk about that.
Right. Karen, you brought up something else. You brought up something else. You were talking about how you're allergic to the dye. In all of these drugs that Karen was just going through, that Adam had posted with the side effects, and everyone does react differently. Karen's allergic to the dye. Thank goodness, nothing bothers me. I'm not allergic to anything. Knock on wood, wherever it may be, I've been able to take any kind of medication without a reaction. So again, your body, talk to your doctor, and just because it says side effects, and Karen had said it and Adam said it, you may or may not have these side effects. But as long as you know ahead of time, you can definitely help with that.
And also, a side effect is different than an allergic reaction.
Correct.
And so a lot of times people say, well, I can't take that drug because it made me have a dry cough. That's not a reaction. That's a side effect. And that is not going to really do any harm, unless maybe, I suppose, if you have asthma or you have other issues. A lot of these drugs can cause coughing, a dry cough, but not being able to breathe and being covered in hives and having your throat swell, that's an allergic reaction. That's something that puts you on the no-no list. So that's your Topic Tuesday.